more than just a composer. He's just a brilliant guy who really understands the relationship between pictures and sound.
He's the perfect marriage between old classics and modern pop. He's both to me.
He's an incredible musical scholar of every style that exists.
How does he do it?
The winner is John Williams for Fiddler on the Roof.
John Williams for Jaws.
John Williams for Star Wars.
John Williams for E.T.
John Williams for Schindler's List.
He's always in a process of discovery. It starts with what he experiences watching a film and then going to the piano and writing.
The music comes from the sky and envelops him. It's the purest form of art I've ever experienced from any human being.
Thanks for joining me today. We'll dive in as we've only got half an hour here. I must say, Laurent, I'm a huge admirer of your work. Those behind-the-scenes documentaries of yours going back to the 90s, I think I've seen them all. I thought I'd seen them all until I checked out your IMDb yesterday when I was doing some more research. There's more for me to watch, but your latest film, music by John Williams, it had me crying within about 2.5 minutes, I think, and it had me laughing and smiling throughout and happy tears. So thank you for making such a wonderful film, first of all.
Well, now you know how I feel, because that was pretty much me throughout the whole production, and you know, at one point we were cutting, and I had producers, and I looked around, and everybody had a smile on their faces, and if it wasn't a smile, it was tears of joy, and so I really feel that we tapped into something that I think, you know. It's not true for all generations, but definitely for mine, and obviously, as you seem to hint, yours, is that he really scored the story of our lives. And I think that his music conjures and taps into things that were part of our awakening to movies, to music even, because, you know, I discovered his music because I lived in France, like about 6 months after the movies came out in America. So I would fantasize by listening to the soundtracks, and so I was introduced into most of my favorite films through music first, and which is a really interesting thing that I've shared with John, and that made me hopefully a good candidate to direct this film, because my relationship to his music was very much the first impression I got of a lot of films that then went on to become my favorites and everybody's favorites.
Yeah, I'm a little bit younger than you, but I had that similar experience where to experience those films again, having seen them maybe in the cinema, was to listen to the soundtrack. There was no other way to consume those movies.
Yes.
Star Wars for me, you know, has been around all my life, really. I was born in 76, so I don't remember any time before that. And he really has been the soundtrack to so many generations as well. You know, my kids know him from Harry Potter. It's incredible, that span of that career. I was trying to think if there's been a musical artist that's had that span, and I thought, oh, the Rolling Stones. Oh, hang on, they were formed in 62. John's been doing music since 52, so he even surpasses them. Incredible.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Not only as he transcended time with audiences, but also with filmmakers. You know, it's very rare also that new generations of filmmakers who you know, essentially may grow up on a different type of cinema. I'm not surprised that all of the so-called movie brats of the 70s loved John, because they're very classically trained. But, you know, the next generation really grew up on MTV and on commercials, and that's where the training was. And for those filmmakers, and then coming full circle with the new Star Wars films, to still embrace him, regardless of age, you know, makes him and the music timeless, really.
And John is quite a private person. I've always gathered that from interviews with him, or, you know, the snippets of interviews you would see over the years. he sort of lets his work do the talking. Was it difficult to convince John to get involved, despite your connections and your back catalogue of fantastic films?
Yeah, it was difficult, and it couldn't have done it without Steven Spielberg at the forefront.
Mm,
When I was involved with working on his 90th birthday, John, that is,
mm,
not Steven, not yet. That I said to Steven, between Steven's archive, mine, Lucasfilm, Kathy Kennedy, and Frank Marshall, I said, it's insane the amount of stuff we have, and we must do a documentary on John
mm,
this. And Stephen approached him and he said yes. And then there was some resistance, and even in a discussion that I had with John about the film, he sort of said, nobody really cares about me. And I know what he means by that. But I said, John, that's not true. But the big goal here is not for the film to be about you, but to be about your music and to be about your musicians. And that was a big factor, I think. And of course, the fact that I've known him 30 years, and
mm,
he's very comfortable with me, and I with him, in the same way that I'm very comfortable with Steven, and I always have been, even if they'll tell me off at times, we're done, and with asking too many questions, you ask too many questions, and it's in the film because that's very
yeah.
much part of my process with them. Like, it's like, oh my God, that guy again. But, I come from a really good place. I come from very much curiosity and respect. And I never asked John outright a personal question. I always came at it through music. And I think he really appreciated that because I even though I'm not a musician, I would say that I was trying to at least, speak his language. And that was a I think a big factor, because after one or two sessions we did, I would bump into him at Amblin because I'm always there, and he'd say, "When are we doing our next thing?" I'm like, "Wow, oh my God, you're really enjoying that, right?" And we did, I mean, those moments with him at the piano, the moments backstage at
Fantastic.
the Hollywood Bowl, the moments in Tanglewood are unforgettable for me as someone who is pretty much the first audience to my own films. And I just loved it, and I was really hoping that this film would appeal to people. But I sort of claim that this film is yes, for people like you and I who love his films and generations, but I think it's also for people who are not born yet.
Mm,
What would we give to have that sort of a document on Mozart or Beethoven? And I really feel he belongs with them.
mm,
And to have allowed cameras into his process, and the filmmaker, inevitably it is subjective. I bring
mm,
in a lot of my own pathos to that, and hopefully it mirrors that of many people. But I think he's exceptional and very courageous of him. It's not something he likes to do. He's very much someone who loves to look ahead, not so
mm,
much behind. And
mm.
I caught myself several times in my relationship with him where I would want to talk about my favorite soundtracks like Towering Inferno or Earthquake, and he would like go like, "Ooh, stop right now, time out." So it's interesting that he got into it, and just like Stephen himself, he gives, they both, once they commit to something, they really give you the tools to succeed. I had no doubt that once and I would, Jamie, I would go in and really talk to him privately,
Mm,
and this is what needs to happen in order to do a film like this. This is not just a sit down interview and then we're done, but sort of really molding the whole the few events we wanted to cover, and also who else was going to talk, and so it was a real collaboration. And as we know, he's a great conductor, so I
yeah.
I followed his guidance.
It is fantastic, those moments of him at the piano. In fact, that's, I think that was the first moment I kind of got tears in my eyes. It wasn't like a big moment of swelling music. It was him at the piano, the simplicity of it and the playfulness and the childlike quality when he holds his hand up and he's playing with his left hand and he's looking at you, and you can tell how dedicated he is, but how playful he still is, and also what a nice relationship you two have. That really comes across in the film.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it's those moments, as I said, were so precious. And it was interesting because one thing that when we were doing sort of a list of things that I wanted to accomplish, one of them that I had heard of that was, sort of a famous thing was the history of the 5 notes from Close Encounters.
Yeah.
And I had said to him, wouldn't it be great if you played the different variations? Because I know you have them. He shows them in the film. He's like, no, I'm not doing that because, and that was such a lesson to me also as a filmmaker. He said, Close Encounters is a masterpiece, and we zeroed in on those 5 notes, and giving the audience, whomever, even if it's one or two, giving them a sort of doubt about what ended up being in the film is almost betraying, sort of like my words, not his, sort of like showing a different Mona Lisa, and say, instead of the one that was ultimately chosen, and people going, oh my gosh, she would have been so much better. Well, you destroy something that is really part of John's culture and part of a great film. But what he gave me instead, he said, but trust me, I will give you something. And I just sort of let him do this incredible demonstration at the piano, comparing notes to grammar and to words, and that was a million times more insightful than anything else I could have come up with. So like I said, being in his hands, that, or the fact I was making the film didn't mean like just Q&A kind of thing. It was really a process, and one where he was trying to understand me as much as I was trying to understand him, and what this needed to be. And for that, I think it shows in the film, as you said, that there was an exchange, and one that could be, he says it, I asked too many questions, and you have a pain in the ass. But he said it with such affection that we still get to the result.
Yeah. Talking of those 5 notes, I'm making a documentary about Joe Alves, the production designer that worked on
Oh,
Close
really?
Encounters. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I talk to him all the time. Yeah, I love.
Yeah, Joe's great. We went out to LA 2 marches running, March 22, March 23. I'm trying to do it in my spare time, either side of my job and my life and everything. But I had Joe at the piano at one point. He just was trying to find those 5 notes because, of course, he designed the board and everything
Yeah,
with
of course.
the lights moving around. And it's amazing when you hear the right 5 notes. Nothing else is a possibility.
No.
That's the great thing about John's music. There's such an inevitability to it somehow. It feels complete to us, in whether it asks that question like those 5 notes do, or whether it's like Ray's theme. It just feels like it's always belonged, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. And there is I think, as JJ was says, there's an inevitability about what he does, and his scores, that you feel like that's the way it should be. For I think it comes from his constant yearning to learn. He's someone who is a constant student of music and art, and is extremely deep, and quotes, even if I don't say it flatly in the film, but he quotes Rachmaninoff, he quotes a lot of people, because he has that much, his language is being formed by his admiration for the classic composers. So there is that thing there, that is and also a true understanding of the role of music in a film, which is, in the case of Star Wars, entering that bizarre world right off the bat, uh, uh, robots that talk and giant Chewbacca. And I mean, on paper, of course, looked ridiculous, was barely agreed upon while filming, and still a challenge in the cutting room. Well, the thing that brought us to this world was George, but John is the first, after in a galaxy far, far away, like boom, that's that. And it's a music that's like, corn gold. It's like, that kind of swashbuckling kind of adventure, and we relate to that. And so the relatability that we feel toward his music is really what makes those movies complete. And hey, Steven says, John is his rewrite artist, so
Yeah. You capture those moments really well, I think, whether it's for George, whether it's for Stephen, when they first hear that score and that feeling you get, there's that lovely moment where you see the countdown on the big screen and the orchestra are ready.
Oh yeah.
That's quite a big emotional moment, I think, for the viewer, because you sort of imagine what it must have felt like to hear that for the first time put against the film that you'd shot, if you were George or Stephen. And
Well,
yeah, I think you carried that off really, really well in the edit.
no, for sure, and thank you for that, because the thing that I hope the viewer can appreciate is that making Star Wars was tough.
Yeah,
Didn't know what they had. So the
yeah.
music is either really going to make or break this film, right? And same thing with Jaws, when Steven suffers through, and now we can laugh about it, the shark wasn't working and all that stuff, but we're talking about, and I'm making a film on Jaws right now, this was really dramatic. I mean, as you'll see the stories in there that have never been spoken of before, that literally were again, I think superficially, we've all said, oh, the shark wasn't working and they went over budget and all that, that feels like something you hear about so many movies. But this was going to literally potentially destroy a man's career,
Mm.
and potentially destroy a studio, when you spend that kind of money. But so I really think that the trust that Stephen had in John's vision for his score, which was, as we explained, completely the opposite of what he had imagined, it really makes for sort of like this gut thing that you have about collaborators, and film is a collaboration, and it's really important to underline that. And Stephen and George and Brian De Palma, he's not in the film, but I've spoken to him a lot about John and all that, recognize that.
Yeah, yeah. One of the other things, of course, I love about your films and this film as well is the wonderful archive footage that you managed to find. Seeing some of that stuff that I've seen before, but remastered in 4K and looking kind of pristine, is one that archive at Lucasfilm, and as you said, Stephen's archive as well. That must have been a real treat for you to dig through.
Yeah, it is a treat, and at the same time, I realized a lot of it had been seen before, as you mentioned, shown by me or in other
There was
films.
that BBC show from way back, wasn't there, as well?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the thing is to use the stuff in a way that feeds your story and not
Yeah.
as illustration. This is not a coffee table book, it really has a story. So you really try to find illustration that will feel novel even to people who may have already seen them. So that was a real a real dance, because how do you tell a story of someone who's lived close to 100 and has been making music since the age of 5? I mean, it's really hard, and trying to find that chronological kind of thing, be a little more at times thematic and be out of
Yes.
sequence. That's why a lot of people fought me on incorporating Branford Marsalis talking about Catch Me If You Can, and the cantina at the beginning of John's career when he's talking about jazz. And I'm like, no,
It
that's,
makes sense.
totally makes sense, but it's a bold move
It is. Yeah.
in the kind of continuity that people usually expect, and it takes you out a bit, but you have to be, I really feel that that keeps the audience alert. Oh my God, if they're talking about Catch Me If You Can now, they may bring up something else. So there's a real, it's very, I write a very strong script, and we of course digress from it, but I come in with a shell, a skeleton that is really a reflection of my vision and the story I want to tell. And then it's up to the editors to tell me I'm wrong, and then
Yeah.
my mini producers. But for the most part, I can defend things, and I can also adjust easily because it's just so. I'm so structured that if you go like this, I'm like, I totally know what you're talking about.
Mm.
So it works both ways. And I have to say on this film, particularly, all the voices were heard and were part of a real sense of family around the film, but around John. Everyone involved had a real connection to him professionally.
Mm.
Whether it's of course Stephen, George, and everyone interviewed, but Kathy Kennedy and Frank Marshall,
Mm.
Ron Howard and his team, Stephen's producers, all those people have been part of John's world in a sense. And so it was kind of great for me to come up with the idea of making the film with Stephen, but then sort of build a sort of family spirit around it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it could have been a hell of a challenge for you to work out which films to spotlight or which music to spotlight, because there's just so much of it. But what I felt was you never fell into the greatest hits kind of trap with it,
Yeah,
as a
no,
lot of people do.
and that was tempting, trust me, because
Yeah.
it's like it's not that it was tempting as much as it was definitely something I was really very much afraid of. Is I don't want this to feel like a hit parade of
Mm.
hits. Nor did I want, because I know John's reputation is impeccable. I didn't expect anyone like challenging like you would if you were doing a film on Bernard Herrmann, Hitchcock's composer. You'd have the voices of Hitchcock saying, well, I fired him from Torn Curtain, and
Mm.
it was impossible to work with. I mean, there's none of that, but I at the same time I just want to make sure it didn't feel like also a vanity project, that would have felt also like sort of not right. So I wanted every single, if we were going to mention even iconic scores, that there would be a story attached to them.
Mm.
That was the rule. It's like, even if you're listing, several historical movies, he still makes a comment about his love for history and how that was challenged when he worked with Oliver Stone,
Mm.
and
Mm.
so there was really a lot of drama, if I may, within each of the sort of segments, even if at times it may have felt it could have been more, just a listing, and I didn't want that.
Was there ever a temptation to go longer than a feature and make it a series, or were you kind of locked into the feature idea off the bat?
No, that was really up to me. Again, in concert, pun intended, with my partners. But I have to tell you, I was coming off of doing Faye Dunaway, and I sat through it at the Cannes Film Festival, and that movie was super tight. It was an hour and 38 minutes, I think, and seeing those films, those documentary films with an audience, you really get a sense that they need to live within an hour and 40 minutes kind of.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you, the greatest compliments I receive on my work is that really rigorous goal to be under an hour and 45 minutes. Because I think it sort of forces you to have a through line. It forces you to be mindful of the audience, capacity for storytelling, and be aware that in today's world, around Oscar time, the biggest complaint you hear from everyone, filmmakers and audience alike, is that films are too long,
Yeah.
and I think you benefit as a filmmaker from saying, this is my goal, and I just stuck to it. And I feel that within the script that I wrote originally, I know exactly how it clocks out, is very, very close to the very first rough cut was under 2 hours,
Well, you hit all of the sweet spots for me, I have to say. I really enjoyed the film, and I'm so grateful that it was you that took this on, because you were definitely the man for the job.
Oh, thank you so much. That's super kind of you.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So a week or two went by, and I went over to his house, and he was at his big Steinway piano, and I was expecting something just tremendously complex. And it's almost like chopsticks. He just used a couple of fingers, and he went, bom, 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 bom. I'm looking around. Bom, 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 bom. Bum, 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 bum.
Think about being completely alone in a dark place where you can't really see anything. It's completely quiet. And the first thing you hear is, you feel something dangerous is coming your way. Just from these low notes in an atmosphere where they don't belong.
At first, I thought he was joking.
Everyone asked me, what does Steven Spielberg think? What were his thoughts when he first heard that? What were your really true thoughts? Did you think I was an idiot?
No, not an idiot at all. I thought, oh my God, we're not going to have an orchestra. We're going to have a piano, and Johnny's going to just do a couple of things on the lower register.
Why didn't you say no?
Because you kept saying, listen to it again.
Okay.
You said, listen to it again. And I started to see the brilliance of what you had done.